Hey traders, welcome to the monthly market preview. So as you know, at the end of last month, we posted our previous preview and we were talking about the dollar completing its correction before heading into some more dollar weakness. And with new talks of stimulus on the table, it seems like the market is starting to price in that stimulus and we're starting to see that dollar weakness. We're starting to see that play out in silver, in gold, precious metals, copper. Those are all heading higher. Oil looks like it wants to head higher, and equities look like they just completed a deep correction and are ready to head higher as well. So we expect continued dollar weakness heading into the election, and that's going to have profound effect on things like equities, like gold, like silver, and potentially that's going to seep down into crypto. Crypto is not as clear as I'd like it to be, but it does seem that Bitcoin does want to head higher eventually. It's just playing out what looks like to be a bit of a corrective structure, and we still expect at least 14 to 15,000 on the upside on Bitcoin over the next few months. So let's dive into some charts and see what else is on the table and what trades are available to us for the month of October. So as you can see, this is the corrective structure we were talking about on the dollar that we went through August and September. Paid out a little bit longer than we thought, but we have seen it looks like an ending of that correction, and we're now in an impulse to the downside. The other option is that what we're looking at was all of that was its own little corrective structure, and now we are in a bit of a bigger, more drawn out correction, where this would just be the A wave, and you'd need to see some choppy corrective price action down towards 19,150, and then another push higher, and all of that would be its own kind of A, B, C corrective structure for continuation to the downside. So if we start to see some choppiness around here, and it takes a long time, kind of all the way up to the election, a little bit of a dip lower, then a post-election kind of jump higher, which is very possible, then we would actually start to see this as a bigger corrective structure for continuation to the downside. However, I'm kind of leaning more towards this as the structure where we're looking at this as a ABCDE expanding triangle, and we are seeing continuation to downside from here. If we zoom out to, say, the dailies, you'll see in the kind of standard Elliott wave composition of this, it would be a impulse to the downside, corrective structure, what we would call a segmented impulse, and another corrective structure of a similar size to the second or the first corrective structure, and then it's a fifth impulse to the downside. That's a standard Elliott wave count, and basically what we're looking at is two corrective structures of similar size. We don't actually count waves at Seneca. We find it counterintuitive to do so. It means you're lots of curve fitting, but when you look at the size of the correction, that's what's important to us here in terms of standard Elliott wave. And these two corrections look very similar, which means I believe that we are at the end of this corrective structure and we are now impulsing it to the downside once more. If we zoom out all the way to the weekly, you'll see exactly what we're looking at in terms of price targets. We've already touched our minimums and gone beyond that. So I believe the next price targets are going to be 90.56 or heading down towards those upper 80s, as I spoke about in the beginning, where we're talking about 87.25 as the potential full downside target. And from there, we believe we'll see a turn in the dollar, and this dollar corrective structure will be complete, because as you can see, this is just a corrective structure from a previous impulse. So as I said, I think dollar weakness is the call heading for the rest of this month, heading up to election, and talks of stimulus is going to be a driver behind that. Going down towards the euro, you'll see euro obviously being a little bit of an inverse to the DXY. You see something very similar. You see a expanding triangle corrective structure and continuation to the upside, with upside targets of around about 124, what's about 12375 on the euro. Potentially, if we zoom out, that structure has a chance to get all the way up to 128. If we get up to 128, obviously the DXY is going into those upper to mid 80s, and that's going to be a completion of a very clean corrective structure for continuation to the downside. That's what I believe we're going to see in the euro moving forward. Pound is a little bit of a different story. It's a little bit of a mixed bag. As you can see, this is our weekly structure, and all the way zoomed out, you see that we've already touched on our median target at 135.50, somewhere around there. And we saw a strong pullback. It's much cleaner on the daily. You'll see we had a nice push higher, up into our minimum or medium target region, and then we had a very strong impulse to the downside. So it's kind of make or break time for the pound. But given what the US dollar is doing in the other pairs, and if you look at the same structure, we have an impulse up, A, B, C, D, E, impulse up. I suspect this is going to be a corrective structure of a similar size to this before a little bit more of a push higher. I'm not saying this is the price action we're going to get, but you should see this be in correction up into the November election, and then probably one leg higher. That's what I'm leaning towards right now, but by no means is that conclusive, because you have some very precarious price action on the lower time frames going into the 4-hour. So as you'll see, we have a strong impulse down, and all of this could play out as its own little small correction, which means that's going to be the end, and we'll see more pound weakness moving forward. If we see that continued pound weakness, I do believe that's the end of the pound move on the higher time frames, and we've seen the full upside target at 135, and this is going to continue all the way down towards parity moving forward. So it's a little bit of a middle ground for the pound, and it's about being patient. And ideally what we want to see, and what I believe makes the most sense, is a choppy move back up towards the highs at 134.70. And if we do see that, then we know what we're looking at is a nice A, B, C corrective structure, and that's going to be continuation to the upside. We do have an entry order below the lows, just in case, with the stop loss above these highs, because if that does play out, we're going to, like I said, I think we're going to see the pound hit all the way to parity, and that parity trade is a nice risk reward trade in terms of downside. As you can see, we see a nice strong move all the way down to this 1-to-1 region where I believe we will be headed moving forward. Then that trade does make sense. So for the pound, it's not as clear as the euro or the DXY, and it's just going to need a little bit of patience to see exactly what the picture is going to look like moving forward. Aussie dollar, US dollar, zoomed out, you'll see, I believe we've come to the end of a corrective structure, and we are pushing higher from here. Very similar to the Aussie dollar yen, we have a nice impulse, a very long drawn out ABC correction, and another impulse higher. I would have liked to see some different price characteristics on in this region, but we talk about that in the academy. But what we'll see moving forward should be clarification of this as a pattern, and we're starting to see a little bit of that clarity on the lower time frames, because as you've seen from those lows, we've seen quite a nice strong push, very impulsive price action, and what looks to be a little bit of a corrective structure, which means continuation to the upside is the logical move forward from here. So be keeping a close eye on this to play out as a nice ABC, and a push higher will be a really nice trade moving forward. New Zealand dollar, US dollar, similar situation. Zoomed out on the dailies, you'll see very clean corrective structure, impulse up, a little bit of a segmented impulse. So all of this would be regarded as our impulse. And we go into an ABC corrective structure, not the cleanest one, but it is there. Very complex B wave, but it's played out really nicely. And then going back down to the lower time frames, we see something very similar. It'll push off the lows, ABC correction, push off the lows. So I believe we could probably start to look at all of this as a corrective structure, or as an impulse, sorry. And moving forward, you will see a little bit of a corrective structure here, more drawn out, maybe something running. And that's going to be a good sign for another impulsive move moving forward, something along those lines. So zooming out to the 4-hour, you'll see that's kind of what we're expecting over the beginning of this month, and upside bullish momentum for the remainder of the month. US dollar CAD, very similar situation. Nice impulse down, long drawn out ABC correction, which really had us confused for a long time. And we're starting to see that play out now as more of a corrective structure for more downside. And as you can see, zooming into lower time frames, it's a very similar situation. Nice strong push off the highs down towards this 132 or 13270 region, and now a little bit of a corrective structure. So this will be a really good trade if this plays out as such, where we have a little bit of a push higher, up towards this 133 region once more, and then a nice turn to the downside. So keep an eye on this because this could be a really good trade. On the weekly, you'll see exactly where we're at in terms of downside targets. A very clean corrective structure here, which I really like. Downside targets should be 126 around about, and the full target is 1205, or let's say 120, just to round it out nicely. So if we are going to see that trade, we're going to see a push from this 133 region all the way down to 120, which is obviously a really nice trade. It should be quite an impulsive move. So we're keeping a close eye on that. It could be a bit choppy, depending on how this kind of plays itself out. This could all be one corrective, or one impulse, sorry, kind of like the DXY, where one of those impulses was segmented. You'll see another impulse down, another long drawn out corrective structure in this region, and then that final push down to 120. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that on the longer time frames, but definitely on the shorter time frames, you're looking for a really good short trade on the US dollar CAD, which kind of matches the oil strength we're seeing at the moment. So, and what we have expectations for oil. So keep a close eye on this as a really good short trade. US dollar Swiss looks a lot like the DXY, pretty much identical really. And what we're looking at is continuation to the downside moving forward. Not my favorite chart, but if you do see some lower time frame corrective structures, then it's worth shorting these moving forward. As you can see, we did have something like that on the lower time frames, a little bit of a running flat, one of our favorite trades, and we've seen an impulse to the downside. Not something I took. I didn't like the structure of it too much, and I don't like the higher degree structure. But if you are in it, it is a really nice trade, and we should expect continued dollar weakness moving forward. The only pair showing something that is not dollar weakness related is the yen, which is quite an interesting picture, but it should play out nicely for us moving forward. I still expect a little bit of yen's weakness over the next few days and weeks, coming up towards the end of the month, and then towards the end of the month, there's a really nice looking short trade on the US dollar yen. So for now, I'm on the sidelines. I don't like this much. I'd have to see a really clean corrective structure come out of this in order to get long, but I don't see that coming, and I don't see it playing out. So I'm just going to sit on the sidelines on the US dollar yen, wait for it to get up to this region, and then look for that short entry. Silver looking really nice. As you can see, we have a nice corrective structure. We have an impulse down, nice little B wave, not too complex, but enough complexity to be suitable, and a fairly decent C wave to the downside with a nice push off the lows. So lots of clarification in terms of price action. And what we're seeing now on the lower time frames really supports that view. We have a nice strong impulse. We're going into a nice complex corrective structure. So you can expect maybe one push higher and a push lower down towards kind of 23.30 would be ideal. And then that's going to be continuation to the upside. That's going to be a nice ABC to play out as a corrective structure for more upside. So I really like this as a trade. Just need to be patient with it. And we can expect, if stimulus is going to be talk of the town heading into election, we can expect this 32 level, even higher, to be tested. So keep a close eye on this. I don't like the length of the correction as in relation to the impulse preceding it, but I do like the price action. And at the very least, we'll be targeting the highs of this, because this could develop into just one long drawn out correction rather than an impulse. So either way, upside is looking good. And this is a trade we were already in. We got in a little bit earlier at the break of this little flag. But we expect a pullback down and then a continuation. So it could be room for a kind of scale in entry, another entry order, if we can find break even for our previous entry. So looking good for more upside, and definitely a trade you want to look at if we see this play out as an ABC correction. Gold, similar situation, impulse down, triangle impulse down. Depending, is all of this an A wave? I don't know. Is this the end of the correction and an impulse higher? I'm not too sure. All I know is that it does look like it wants to head higher from here. In terms of price action on the lower time frames, I don't really like it. It looks really messy. but at the same time, it still looks like it wants to head higher from here, and a potential flag trade to take to the upside. If you do take this trade, I would definitely move it to break even as early as possible because of the uncertainty around the price action. Gold-silver ratio, zoomed out, you'll see I like silver over gold, and we should see a continuation of that reflation trade, at least for the foreseeable future. It is coming close to an end, but at the same time, I do see its continuation playing out. Longer time frames, you can see little ABC correction. We are very much near our full-time targets, which are in this region of 30 to 50, even as high as 60. And when we see this turn, we're going to see a change in dollar sentiment. But this is something as a gauge that we're keeping an eye on very closely. Copper still continues to push higher. We already touched on our medium targets. It looked like potentially we were going to turn on the lower time frames. It was looking kind of precarious, but at the moment it looks like we're going to see continuation in copper to the upside. Full upside targets of 335 are definitely on the cards. If we go into, say, the 4 hour, you'll see it played out as a little bit of a convoluted correction, a little bit of an ABC expanding triangle. Very worried at this point, as you can see, very much kind of head and shoulders top look to it in this region with this as your neckline, and it broke down, but it looks like it's heading higher from here. If you go into the very low time frames, you'll see we had a nice strong impulse off the lows, and we're going into a little bit of a correction, which looks like it's ready to push higher eventually. This is going to take some time, I think, to play out. Keeping an eye on this, but at the end of the day, it does look like it wants to head higher and go push towards our full upside targets at that 335 region. Platinum remains a bit of a mess, although it does look kind of like a corrective structure is complete. You can see we have a little bit of an impulse down. I would potentially look at all of that as an expanding triangle B wave, and then another push lower. And that could be all a complete ABC correction. And now we are heading higher. Still bullish platinum. Platinum has been lagging the precious metals, and I do believe we need to see a push for platinum moving forward. It might catch up now. We've seen a nice push off the lows at 830, heading up towards this 910 region. So a really nice strong push. We've gone into a little bit of a correction here. So we're keeping a close eye on price action in this region and how it's going to play out. As you can see on the higher time frames, I'm still very bullish platinum and believe we are going to see a push towards at least 1,300, potentially as high as 1,500. But as you can see, compared to copper, it's much further away from its targets, and I really believe we can see a really strong push in platinum moving forward. Palladium still playing itself out, really long drawn out price action. We've been in this really complex, messy B wave since May. It's just taken forever to play out, but it does look like it's approaching an area where we could start to see it complete, and we should see a strong push down towards kind of 1,750. Obviously, this could just continue to chop all the way up for a really long time. Really frustrating, so very difficult to trade, and kind of only just keeping half an eye on this for now. Euro pound looking good to be playing out as a really complex drawn out B wave, but could play out really nicely to follow that. So we're keeping a close eye on this to be a complete ABCDE expanding triangle following a decent impulse, which means we could get a really strong push higher in the euro this month, heading into middle to the end of the month. What we're really waiting for is a break of these lows at 9025. Once we see these lows broken, then we'll definitely start to look for those long trades to the upside, because it could get very impulsive with a lot of talk about the UK heading into another lockdown, lots of Brexit strife at the moment. So I think this 9.5 region is very much on the cards and could come very quickly once these lows are broken. So this is definitely one we'll be keeping a close eye on moving forward. Euro Oz, Euro New Zealand, absolute mess at the moment, just keeping a close eye, but I think we're on the sidelines for the foreseeable future. Euro New Zealand is the only one that's really clean and clear, and it looks like it's in the middle of an expanding triangle B wave, which is just impossible to trade. So we're sitting on the sidelines for now, waiting to see how this plays out. Euro CAD, kind of similar situation, really messy. We want to see a break of this to trade to the short side, but it could get more complex, could come down towards this region, then push up once more before pulling back down. And only after all of this is played out will there be a decent trade in it for us. So for now, I'll remain on the sidelines. Euro Swiss, similar scenario. As you can see, look at this price action, just absolute mess since July, just choppy sideways. At the same time, we started to see a little bit of clarity in this. A nice impulse down, ABC kind of running flat, and a nice push lower. And if you zoom into the lower time frames, you get another running flat potentially with a little bit of a triangle in the middle. That's why this is so messy. So you have this A wave up, impulse down, triangle, impulse down as a B wave, and then another impulse up as a C wave, and we started to see a push lower. So if you start to see some corrective price action on the hourly that looks a little bit like this, then I would look to take that as a flag entry to the downside, because our downside target is sitting pretty nicely at this 1.06 region down at these lows. Once that plays out, you'll see that all of this is going to play out as an A, B, C to the downside, and then we're going to look for those long entries. So kind of good looking trades both ways. Euro yen is looking really strong. So like we said, the yen is actually looking really weak across the board. And if the yen is looking weak against the US dollar and the euro is looking strong against the dollar, we can expect this euro yen to take off really nicely. And that's exactly what the price action is suggesting. Zooming all the way out to the weeklies, you'll see what we've had is a nice impulse higher, long drawn out corrective structure, and we're looking like we want to break up towards this 140 region. So really nice high targets. Going into the dailies, you'll see we've had a strong impulse off the lows and gone into a fairly decent running flat correction. This B wave is not great, but it does look really good for more upside. Going into the 8-hour, impulse down, long drawn out corrective price structure up, and then a nice impulse down, as you can see, really clean on all time frames. 4-hour, nice push off the lows, went into a bit of a corrective structure, and in hindsight, if you go into the hourly, we had a really nice flag entry here at the very beginning of the month. But in hindsight, it's always easy to trade. Now we look for entries. We look for better entries. If you see now, we are sitting right at where a conservative entry order would be if we traded this as a corrective structure. So getting long right now, not such a bad idea, and putting an entry order below these lows or a stop loss below these lows could work out nicely for you. So pretty decent looking trade to get into right now. Given the upside potential of this, it's definitely worth looking at. Pound Oz, we're sitting on the sidelines waiting for an entry order, looking for those short trades. I still don't like it. I don't like this as a B wave, and I think this is going to develop into something way more complex. Pound New Zealand, very similar situation. Lots of impulses. We need some corrective price action to show us exactly what we're looking at. So for now, on the sidelines. Pound CAD, looks like it wants to play out as a triangle, but that's going to take some time as well. So again, sitting on the sidelines. So all these Oz New Zealand CAD pairs within the euro and the pound are not looking good at all in terms of clarity. So we sit on the sidelines for those. Pound Swiss, impulse up, ABC looking for another impulse up. We had a little bit of a corrective structure, not too bad. Little A wave down, nice corrective structure up, A wave down, and we were looking for this to just take off, but then got to 2nd of October, and it's just been chopping sideways since then. So maybe just a slow start, which is fine. Let that be it. Entry order above the highs, stop below the lows. Not such a bad idea. Again, upside targets are really good with this too. Minimum target kind of 126, medium target 130, full target 135.5. So looks really good to trade to the upside. I prefer the pound yen though, especially since the yen is looking weak. So if we take a look, pretty much the same scenario. Impulse off the lows, ABC correction, and pushing higher from here. Min targets 143, median targets 148, and full targets 155. Going into the hourly, you see we haven't had, we had a nice push off the lows, went into a bit of an ABCDE expanding triangle, and then another push off the lows. But again, sitting right into where a conservative entry order would be for this correction. So worth taking. I think entry order above the highs, stop loss below these lows, definitely worth taking. Upside target shows a fairly decent risk reward ratio for that trade. For the minimum targets, I believe we'll be looking at about 2 to 1, maybe 2.5 to 1. It's not too bad, not ideal. Let's see what we get here, about 2.4 to 1. But if we start to push up towards median targets, which I believe we're going to see, that's a 4 to 1, and full targets 6.5 to 1. So nice looking trade, definitely worth taking in my book. Aussie dollar yen, definitely one for the cards. Looks really good. Just look at this price structure. Really strong impulse up. ABC, corrective structure, nice running flat, nice turn, nice little impulse on the lower time frames, which you can see here. Very nice little impulse off the lows, and a little bit of a corrective structure. This is our first corrective structure to be trading to the upside. So ABC, wait for this to play out, and then look for those long entries. Entry order above the highs, also a good idea. As you can see, upside targets for this one are way up towards the 84 to 92 region, so definitely worth looking at for a long trade. I like this Aussie yen. I like New Zealand dollar yen. I'm already long New Zealand dollar yen, looking for this potentially another entry order. As you can see, daily time frame impulse up, really clean corrective structure, and now looking for another impulse up towards our minimum targets and full targets up here. Going into the lower time frames, similar scenario. Looks like a very good potential for another entry. So push down, choppy price action up, potential move lower, which means a nice long. Obviously, there's potential that all of this was the correction, in which case your long should already be in, but I have the feeling we're going to come and see the 69.60 region once more, 69.80, before heading higher. So when you see that, that's a good sign to get long. Oz New Zealand, also a little bit of an enigma, hard to say what it is at the moment. I'm looking at all of this as a long impulse, which means all of this is going to be playing out as a corrective structure for quite some time. So I'm kind of on the sidelines for this. You zoom into the lower time frames, try and say the 4 hour. There's a little bit of a structure here which suggests further downside. As you can see, we're running flat for more downside. So keeping an eye on this to break these lows, potentially head a bit lower, and then turn to the upside from there. But for now, nothing much in it for me. I'm sitting on the sidelines for that. Aussie CAD starting to show itself as a bit of a corrective structure. Potentially all of this played out as an ABC. And then we're off to the races. I just don't like the length of the correction. It's been a bit too short for me. So I remain on the sidelines for this. Lower time frames, potentially an entry here for a long. Nice strong impulse going into a bit of a corrective structure to give this a little bit of time to play out, but there could be a really nice long trade in it for you moving forward. Not my favorite pair though, very choppy, very messy. Oz Swiss, thought we had seen the lows and we were heading higher. Had a nice impulse, ABC impulse, but then from there we just pushed down. Potentially this is just a little correction for more upside, but also potential, if you zoom out, that this is going back down to test kind of the 64, 65 region in this here to complete the corrective structure first. Looking at, zooming out, looking at all of that as a corrective structure. Ideally, I'd want to go see a break of these lows at 64. Ideally, actually, I'd want to see a break of these lows at 60, yeah, at 64 all the way down here, and then a push up from there. But it could go either way. This could have played out as the contracting flat. Obviously, very difficult to trade if it did. So just be patient with this one. Swiss yen, I still like a big move lower, a really big move lower, down towards kind of 100, which is a big move. That being said, in terms of entry, it's been really difficult to see those highs. As you can see, looked like we topped out, had a nice strong push down, but nothing that would signify an entry. It was just really messy, really impulsive price action, really quick moves, and doesn't really give us much in terms of a potential trade. So I still like this as a short trade. I just think it's too early and very difficult to find an entry order right now. So we'll see how things develop. If we start to see short entries, definitely want to get into those. US oil, I'm going to go straight to UK oil because the same picture. We've been looking at this for a while and it looks like it's starting to play out in our favor. A wave down, nice corrective B wave to the upside, C wave down, which will be classified as this one. And it looks like we're ready to go all the way up toward our full targets, which I believe is around about 55 towards 65 as full targets. The only issue I have here is that all of this could be playing out as its own little corrective structure, and we could still one last time go and see these lows of 38 broken before pulling up to the upside. So definitely wanted to keep an eye on. We'll see how things play out, but I still like to look for those long entries from here. The hourly is giving us a potential long entry right now. If we can see this pull back down towards kind of 41, then I would take that as a long. I'll put a long entry above the highs because that should, at the very least, push up towards 43. At the very least, you'll get break even if this does play out as an ABC corrective structure, which it really does look like that's what it is. So kind of higher time frame and lower time frame showing different story. We just need to be patient with us and keep our stops pretty tight for trading this, at least for now. S&P 500, zooming out. If you looked at our last webinars, this is exactly what we were looking for a long time. It played out a lot longer than we wanted it to, but it has played out exactly as we thought it would. Impulse to the downside, long drawn out B wave, impulse to the downside. We're now looking for long entries. We actually play this through call options, so just expecting this to continue higher, but long entries right now looking a bit scarce. I don't like this as a B wave. I think this might play out as an expanding triangle, which means one more push down towards there. And if that does come, then you can start to look for long entries. Upside target, I still think 4,000 is on the cards. I still think this is going to be stimulus driven. And you can see more about that in our stimulus video, which we posted previously. NDX, I don't like it at all. I think we are just in correction in NDX and we're going to be here for a while. So for now, looking at this and potentially one more move lower or just a choppy move all the way back up to 12500. So nothing in it for me in tech. I think tech's really overdone and needs kind of time to cool off. Much better trades on the cards elsewhere, such as the Dow. Dow, very clean, very clear price action, very much the same as the S&P, just a much clearer pattern, much cleaner pattern. So expect a push higher from here. Upside targets also around about 34,000, sorry, on the Dow. So really looking for upside entries on the Dow. But for now, we need to be patient. There's nothing really on the cards in terms of an entry. And I think this is also going to end up playing out as an expanding triangle before it gets going. Kind of uncertainty in the markets first, but then stimulus will come and we'll see that push higher. US 2000, very much the same. Russell looking really, really bullish, especially in these early parts. As you can see, look at this impulse to the upside. I think the other ones are going to play out pretty much the same. Impulse, expanding triangle, impulse. The Russell is still in its expanding triangle, but should get that impulse to the upside. So very bullish US equities heading into October, heading into the election. DAX, kind of bullish too. I think this ABC is done. I think we're going to see more upside from here. And I think we've seen the lows. So right now, looking for those entry orders. Might take a little while for this to play out. Maybe this was an expanding triangle as well. I don't really like it, but you want to start to look to get long. Entry order below the lows is fine for me. And it looks really like it wants to head higher from here. As you can see, look at this price structure, nice and clean. Euro, pretty much the same. Not as clean as the DAX, but Euro equities, still looking good to me. UK equities, also looking good. Our members have gotten a full breakdown of this, but we really like this for a move much higher from here. So we'll be keeping a close eye on this one for those entry orders. It's looking really nice. seeing volatility really come down, and lack of volatility kind of begets volatility. So you can expect a really strong push up from here. Aussie equities also looking good, really clean ABC, and you should see a push higher from here. Overall, Australia is looking really good in terms of Forex and equities. So their economy maybe not hit as hard as the other major economies in terms of the coronavirus. So keeping a close eye on that, and some really good investment opportunities, because you can trade both the FX and the equities, because you're getting that advantage. You're getting that FX advantage by trading the equities. So definitely one to look at. Nikkei, I think we still need to see some downside first before I get comfortable with the long trade idea. I'd like to see a pullback down towards 2200 first, and then I'd look to get long. So I like the equities, just too early. Emerging markets, still long. Nifty, still long. Still think this is going to continue to the upside. China, I think, is going to complete a little bit of a corrective structure here. I think we're going to be here for a while. We're going to push up again to the highs, then push back down, and heading in towards the end of the year, you'll get a continuation to the upside. So sitting on the sidelines in China equities for now. US dollars I still like in terms of shorts. I still see some EM market strength, especially against the dollar. US dollars downside targets 1580, full target 1380, but I still think 1455 is a very key level on this pair. US dollar Brazil, you can start to see a push lower now, I think. A little ABC and a push down to the downside. A little bit of MACD divergence potentially. I'd like to see this start to really get some legs to the downside, which will kind of add into the dollar weakness thesis. US dollar Mexican also looking really good. Look at this price structure. A, B, C, and then just a really clean, strong impulse off the highs there. So you can continue to see US dollar weakness in emerging markets. Ruble, a little bit of a different story, but at the same time, still expect another push down at some point. Singapore dollar, pretty much the same story. A, B, C, D, E expanding. I think that's what it's going to play out as, and continuation to the downside. Zooming out on the Singapore dollar, you'll see downside target median 134 odd and full target 130. So still some downside to come in my view before we see that turn to the upside. Turkey is just an absolute mess. Definitely want to stay away from the Turkish lira. And finally, crypto. Crypto, very messy chart at the moment. It's very hard to justify some real solid long entries. I like it in terms of a macro picture, but the lower time frames just aren't giving me what I'm looking for. So speculatively speaking, what I'm looking at is the 8 hour. I think we're in the beginning of a little bit of a drawn out correction where all of this is your first impulse. This is your A wave, and now we're going to see a long choppy move up towards 12,500. Following that, one more push lower, and then you're off to the races. So I think we're going to be here for a while, and this is very speculative. It's very early days to say that is true. So sitting on the sidelines for now. I remain bullish crypto in the long term, but shorter time frames very unclear as we speak. Ethereum, similar scenario, and XRP, similar scenario. You're seeing a bit of SEC, an SEC war against crypto at the moment, which kind of adds to the unclear picture and the sideways move at the moment. But I think once all that gets cleared out, you're really going to start to see Bitcoin take off. If you're going to buy any crypto, Ripple for some reason seems to be the one you want to be in. So keep that in mind if you do want to get in. It's cool, guys. That's the markets. As we said, we're looking for that dollar weakness to come. And with that dollar weakness, you're going to see rising equities. You're going to see rising oil. You're going to see rising gold and silver, precious metals. Like we said, crypto, as you can see, a little bit uncertain about what's happening there. But I still remain bullish in the long term because I think this is going to be a stimulus-driven rally, and stimulus is always going to be good for crypto. I think there's just a little bit of uncertainty in crypto because of the SEC and the kind of legal battles that's happening at the moment. But once those battles get cleared out, once things get cleared up, I think we're really going to see Bitcoin shine heading towards the end of the year. So right now, what we're looking at is those weak dollar trades, looking at those weak yen trades. Those look really good, and looking for those long equities. So cool, guys. Have a great month. We're still holding a special on our academy, 50% off for the first few traders that join. We have limited spots available. I think there's 3 or 4 spots left. So if you're looking to get in, this is the lowest the price is ever going to be. So jump in as soon as possible, and we'll see you there.